Let's picture this. Every single morning, millions of us wake up and just begin our day. We pour that first cup of coffee, we check our phones, we head off to work, or maybe we just hit add to cart. These are completely ordinary moments. They're so familiar that they literally fade right into the background of our lives. But what if I told you there's an invisible thread connecting every single one of those seemingly isolated mundane actions? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the hard data behind our daily habits. Because the wild truth is, those small, everyday choices are quietly writing a much, much larger story about our environment, our economy, and really our identity as a nation.
It's a huge question, right? What if small choices actually shape a nation? Now, behavioral economist Dr. Emily Carter puts it brilliantly. She says we really like to think our choices are entirely personal, but in reality, they're part of a massive, powerful system. Think about it. We make thousands of purchasing decisions every single year. And let's be honest, convenience usually leads the way. But behind every single product we buy, there's a journey spanning continents and carrying massive consequences. To really get how we arrived here, we've got to step back and look at the blueprint of the American consumer mindset.
Okay, let's dive into this timeline. Picture it. It's the end of World War II. Returning soldiers are coming home to an economy pulling itself out of the Depression and the war. Suddenly, young adults have spending power like never before. I mean, think about this. Between 1945 and 1949, Americans bought a staggering 20 million refrigerators and over 21 million cars. Millions of TVs, millions of stoves. The national focus shifted super fast to domestic pragmatism. It was all about modernizing the home with the absolute latest appliances. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just seen as some luxury. It was actually framed as absolutely essential to the fabric of the country. Yeah, as historian Elizabeth Cohen points out, being a consumer back then didn't mean you were just treating yourself. It actually meant you were doing your patriotic duty. The good purchaser devoted to more, newer, and better was the good citizen. The entire economic recovery of the U.S. literally depended on this dynamic, mass consumption economy. So buying Tupperware to keep your food fresh or getting that shiny new TV for the living room, that was contributing to the success of the American way of life. It defined the good life. But fast forward a few decades, and this patriotic drive for more, newer, and better kind of morphed. It became hardwired into our psychology.
And that evolution brings us right to today, and to a fascinating field, behavioral economics. This is basically the study of the psychological factors influencing our economic decisions. See, traditional economics assumes we are perfectly rational beings, always making the absolute best choices with the information we have. But let's be real, humans just don't act like that. Our daily purchasing habits, fueled by this ultra-convenient society we've built, are deeply rooted in our cognitive hardwiring and our bounds of rationality. We've got mental limitations and cognitive blind spots that businesses understand very, very well.
Now, what's really fascinating about these psychological hurdles is exactly how these mental traps work on us every day. First off, we use something called mental accounting. That's where we separate our spending into little mental buckets, which somehow makes us way more willing to part with our cash. Then we've got anchoring and status quo bias. Basically, if an option is presented as the default, like say fast shipping, we just stick with it, no questions asked. Add an unbounded willpower where we totally lack self-control even when we know what's best for us in the long run, and unbounded selfishness, where we just want that immediate gratification. Put it all together, and these quirks keep us completely hooked on an individualistic, short-term convenience mindset.
And guys, the physical consequences of that psychology are staggering. Because we prioritize immediate convenience above almost everything else, we fueled entire global industries built on just going faster and faster. Just look at the numbers. Today, fast fashion alone drives 10% of global carbon emissions, and our food systems, they account for over 25%. To put that into perspective on a human scale, the average American throws away 37 kilograms of clothes every single year, just churning through trend-driven overconsumption. Our demand for cheap, instant goods is depleting resources at an absolutely alarming rate. And the entire life cycle of everyday materials brilliantly illustrates just how deep those consequences run. Let's look at plastic. It's not just about throwing a bottle away. The harm starts way earlier, with fossil fuel extraction heavily driven by fracking, which pollutes the soil and water right nearby. Then, during the production and use phases, these materials shed microplastics, and unfortunately, those have infiltrated our food chain, our drinking water, and incredibly, even human blood. Finally, at the end of the line in waste and mismanagement, we're seeing massive greenhouse gas emissions from incineration and a huge loss of marine ecosystems. every single step of the cycle carries a heavy toll. And researchers have actually managed to put a number on that toll: $436 billion. That is the conservative baseline estimate of the annual social cost of plastic to the United States alone. And honestly, experts say that figure could easily stretch to over $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion. That covers the cost of human disease from chemical exposure, the greenhouse gas emissions, landfilling expenses, and the massive losses in tourism and fisheries. It is a gigantic, hidden price tag that we, the public, are paying just for the convenience of cheap materials. So, a lot of folks think the fix is simple, right? Just shop online to save the environment. But the data tells a totally different story. So the crucial point is right here. For a typical 10-mile round trip, a traditional shopping run generates about 8.7 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now, an online order, when you factor in the energy for the servers, the packaging, and those last-mile delivery trucks, generates about 8.3 kilograms. The gap is incredibly narrow, literally less than half a kilogram. It turns out just clicking buy now while sitting on the couch is definitely not the environmental silver bullet we thought it was. Okay, so this tells us something really important. If the physical act of getting a product to your door, whether you drive to the store or a delivery truck drives to you, has basically the same environmental impact, then the true power of our choices has to lie somewhere else. It lies in where we choose to spend our money, not just how we shop. So we're going to pivot now. We're zooming in from the environmental data to uncover a hidden opportunity right inside our economic data, looking at how our dollars actually circulate through our own local communities. Check out the findings from this comprehensive economic study out of Portland, Maine. It measured exactly what happens when you buy from an independent local firm versus a massive national retail chain. It's totally fascinating. Local businesses keep about 60.1% of their spending right there in the county. They hire local accountants, they use local repair services, and their employees spend their wages locally. This creates an economic multiplier of 1.58. But national chains, they remit their profits to some out-of-state corporate HQ and source their goods globally, which drops their multiplier way down to 1.33. And here's where it gets really exciting. The researchers figured out that shifting just 10% of household spending away from those national chains and into local businesses isn't just a quaint, feel-good idea, it's a powerhouse economic engine. By making that small 10% shift, millions of dollars get reallocated. Choosing that local mom-and-pop shop systemically enriches your community. It prevents your money from leaking out of town, and it builds a much stronger, more resilient local economy. That's a massive net positive for community output and employment. Let's move forward and see how this builds into real action. We absolutely don't have to stay trapped by the psychology of convenience. Community organizer Mai Lopez says it perfectly. It's not about being perfect, it's about being aware, because awareness leads to action. We can actually shift toward a sustainable, collective-centric mindset with just 3 simple nudges. Step 1, combine your trips to cut down on driving emissions. Step 2, buy local to instantly boost your community's economic multiplier. And step 3, if you do buy online, break that status quo bias and choose slow delivery. It lets logistics companies optimize their shipping routes and significantly lower their carbon footprint. Look, we're human. We aren't perfectly rational, and the systems built all around us thrive on keeping things fast, convenient, and isolated. But as the data clearly shows, those ordinary moments, the coffee we pour, the packages we order, the local stores we walk into, they are the invisible threads weaving the future of our nation's economy and environment. The real power isn't just held by massive corporations. It sits right there in our wallets and our daily routines. Because the future isn't something that just happens. It's something we create. So leaving you with this final thought today. Now that you see the thread, what will your next choice be?